All right, everyone, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the State Small Business Credit Initiative Program Overview. I am Andrea Wojcik. I'm the Director of Communications for the Delaware Division of Small Business. A couple of housekeeping items before I turn it over to our Director, Regina Mitchell. This webinar is being recorded. It will be placed on our website at de.gov/SSBCI, and I will have my communications manager, Susie, drop that address into the chat. It will be placed there after the webinar is over and also on our YouTube channel. Speaking of chat, we will have plenty of time for questions during this presentation. When we get to the question section, please put your questions in question and answer, not in the chat box, and we will go through and moderate them as they come. So with that, I will turn it over now to Regina, who is the Director of the Division of Small Business.
Thank you, Andrea. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We'll be providing information about our SSBCI lending programs, so the Delaware Loan Participation Program and the Delaware Capital Access Program, and specifically how your organization can partner with our division. Just wanted to note, we did notice some registrations for the webinar that do not appear to be affiliated with a bank or a lending institution. So wanted to clarify that this webinar is intended specifically for our lending institutions, so banks, credit unions, and CDFIs, and not small business owners. The programs we are discussing will provide loans or capital through lenders, but not directly from the division to a small business owner. So if you are a small business owner or you're not here to learn specifically about these two programs, you may want to drop off, as we're going to be solely focused on requirements for banking institutions to participate with us. Okay. Next slide, please, Andrea. So what is the State Small Business Credit Initiative, or SSBCI? So this is a program that's funded by the U.S. Department of Treasury, focused on increasing access to capital for small businesses and leveraging private financing. There's also a strong emphasis on increasing access for traditionally underserved companies, which includes businesses owned by socially and economically disadvantaged individuals or SETI-owned businesses, and very small businesses, which Treasury defines as those with fewer than 10 employees. So Delaware has been awarded $60.9 million for 4 programs over a 10-year period. Treasury releases the funding in 3 tranches. So we've received our first allocation, and then we can apply for the next allocation after 24 to 36 months once we've dispersed 80% of the current funding. And then again for the 3rd tranche. Next slide, please. So we've allocated our SSBCI funding to 4 separate programs under 2 general categories. So this time around, we're standing up 2 venture-related programs, which are new to Delaware. So the Early Stage VC Fund Program and the Accelerator and Seed Capital Program. We have released RFPs for both of those programs with responses due at the end of May. And the links for those RFPs can be found on our website, again in the chat, that is de.gov/SSBCI. But so we're not talking about those today. We are talking about our lending programs. These have been in operation since at least the last round of SSBCI, which was around 2010. So these are, again, the Loan Participation Program and the Capital Access Program. Some of the components of these programs have been updated to reflect the new guidelines from Treasury, which you will hear us say often today. Obviously, these are federally funded programs, so we are required to abide by the federal guidelines. So we'll mention this several times, but again, you can find the link to those guidelines on our website as well. And so if you have participated in either of these programs in the past, there's still new information that we'll be sharing with you here today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew Harton, who is our Business Finance Director, and he will delve further into the specific details for each program.
All right, thank you, Regina. So perhaps the most frequent question we receive regarding SSBCI funded programs is how the funding can be used. And generally speaking, the answer is that SSBCI funds can be used for just about any business purpose. So that includes startup costs, working capital, franchise fees, equipment, inventory, things of that nature. Now we'll talk a little bit more about some of the restrictions on the next slide. But before I get to that, why do we have these SSBCI funds and who are they for? So SSBCI funds are intended to target those businesses that need access to capital, but maybe they fall behind on one or more credit metrics, such as lacking collateral or being too small. And you can go to the next slide, Andrea, please. Cool, so let's talk a little bit about some of the prohibited uses of SSBCI funds. So SSBCI funds cannot be used for things such as investing in passive real estate or purchasing securities, lobbying activities, paying overdue taxes, things of that nature. I'd like to emphasize that this list does not reflect all prohibited uses of SSBCI funds, and nor does it address some of the special exceptions that may apply to these restrictions. So just as an example, you'll see a couple of these have little asterisks on the end there. Although funds cannot be used to hold passive investments in real estate, if a holding company, let's say, wanted to use SSBCI funds to passively hold a real estate investment that it then leased out to an affiliated operating company, and that operating company used 100% of the space, then that would be an example of something that's permissible under the U.S. Treasury guidelines. For this reason, I cannot stress enough that participating lenders assign one or more individuals to become intimately familiar with the U.S. Treasury's SSBCI guidelines. You'll find a link to those guidelines in this presentation, and you'll also find a link to those guidelines on our website. Another example is this last bullet here. Generally speaking, you cannot use SSBCI funds in combination with an SBA guaranteed loan or other portion of a federal loan. But there are a few unique exceptions to this rule. For example, if you were to receive express written consent of the Treasury and the funds that you were using SSBCI funds for were for a project that was separate and distinct from, let's say, a project that you were using other federal funds for, there may be an example in which that's permitted. So again, generally speaking, these things are prohibited, but there are a few exceptions, and that's why I recommend that lenders really become familiar with the U.S. Treasury guidelines. And we can go to the next slide, please. All right, so what businesses are eligible? The good news is that most Delaware small businesses, including corporations, partnerships, even nonprofits or cooperatives, will be eligible for SSBCI funds, which is good news. There are some rules here. So for the Capital Access Program, so the Delaware Capital Access Program that we're going to be talking about shortly, the business must have 500 employees or less. And for loan participation programs, the business must have 750 employees or less. There are other rules here. For example, they cannot be a business engaged in speculative activities. So no day traders, right? They cannot be engaged in pyramid sales, and they can not make, sell, service, or distribute products that are basically federally prohibited. This really is talking mostly about marijuana-related businesses, vape stores, things of that nature. You can go to the next slide. All right, so what lenders are eligible to participate? I hope that most lenders in Delaware are here today, and this program is reserved primarily for banks, credit unions, and community development financial institutions, also known as CDFIs, which we'll talk a little bit more here shortly about. All right, and another question we receive a lot is, and it's very relevant to this particular presentation, is how to become a participating lender. So we have a table here. This is provided from the U.S. Treasury regarding certain documents that are required to be submitted to us in order to enroll a lender as a participating lender. And this is basically because the Treasury requires that participating lenders demonstrate that they have the experience and the capacity to participate in these programs. This table can also be found on our website. So if you are a participating lender and you're interested in becoming a participating lender, just take a look at the institution type here on the left, and you can submit the documents that are required here to our business finance email, which is business_finance@delaware.gov. If you are interested in participating in the Delaware Capital Access Program, we will also execute a master participation agreement, but that will actually follow the submission of these documents. All right, we can move on. All right, so where can a lender get more information? Our team here at the Division of Small Business, special thanks to Andrea especially, has been putting in a lot of hard work here, updating our website. So the first place I recommend lenders to go is to the Delaware Division of Small Business website at de.gov/SSBCI. And there you'll find a lot of materials in this presentation, as well as this presentation when we're done here today. I also recommend lenders check out the U.S. Treasury website, a link to which is provided here for more detailed information on program exceptions and things of that nature. We've also attached here to this particular document a couple relevant links to U.S. Treasury guidelines and facts about the SSBCI program. Go next. All right, so first up, we're going to talk about the Delaware Loan Participation Program, so DELPP. So this is a concept that I'm sure most lenders are already familiar with. Basically, if a lender would like to reduce their risk and exposure to a loan, they can request that we here at the division participate. If the division chooses to participate, we will purchase a participation in the loan using SSBCI funds. And the loan will still be completely serviced and originated through the participating lender. Now, one note about this is that we would prefer to participate in loans that are medium to long term. So a length of 5 years or less would be preferred, but we will participate in loans with a maximum loan term of up to 10 years. Oh. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we have some of the key program characteristics of our loan participation program. So one is that the DSB, so our portion of the loan, will carry an interest rate that is fixed at the Wall Street Journal prime rate. And that is the prime rate that is established as of the date of the origination of the loan. We will perform our own due diligence and review of the lender's underwriting analysis. So this is something that's a little bit different about the loan participation program versus the Delaware Capital Access Program we'll be discussing here shortly, is that in the loan participation program, we will also review the lender's underwriting materials and make sure that we are also comfortable participating in this loan. Our participation percentage is capped at 50%. And if the dollar amount of our participation exceeds $500,000, then our ability to participate will be contingent upon CDF approval. CDF approval, so CDF stands for Council on Development Finance. And this is a council that meets typically once a month. And in order for us to participate in a loan over $500,000, we would have to bring this loan participation agreement to the council, and they would have to vote to approve this participation. So that's just something to keep in mind if you're interested in the division participating in a loan that is quite large or over $500,000. We will not participate in any transaction that exceeds $5 million, which means that, and that's the total transaction. So our loan participation is capped at $2.5 million. And another important thing to note especially for lenders here, is that our loan will be subordinate to the lender's loan on collateral. And that's because we want to encourage as many lenders as possible to participate in this program. As I mentioned before, the lender will actually service this loan, and the collections regarding principal and charges and fees will be split on a pro rata basis with the division. And yeah, as I mentioned, the division's loan, we will not participate in loans with terms that exceed 10 years. Okay, so how does this program work generally? So the borrower will apply for a loan directly with a participating lender. And if the participating lender requests that the division participate, perhaps they're not willing to lend the full amount that the borrower is requesting, then in that case, they can send the required documentation to us here at the Division of Small Business. And that would be to the business_finance email that you saw on the previous slide. We will analyze the lender's underwriting analysis, and should we choose to participate, then we will draft a loan participation agreement, which will then be fully executed between us and the lender. Each loan participation will require an individual loan participation agreement to be executed. We will remit payment to the lender for our portion of the loan. And then from then on, the lender will actually act as the point of contact for the borrower. And actually throughout this whole process, they will act as the point of contact for the borrower. They will service the loan, and they will distribute to the division our portion of payments on a pro rata basis as they are received. And the last thing that we ask of these lenders is that they submit a quarterly report, quarterly enrollment report to the division. This is part of the U.S. Treasury's guidelines. And that report will detail things like outstanding principal balance, the status of the borrower in terms of being up to date or behind on payments or in default, and things of that nature. And a more complete list of what's required can be provided to the lender once they're established as a participating lender. Okay. So here we just have a list of some of the required pre-enrollment documents. Although this list looks long, most of these documents are quite straightforward and require review and signature from the lender or from the borrower, or in some cases from both. All of these documents will be found on our website. So we have the application and of course the following exhibits. So lenders can keep these on file, but if they need to find access to these are also available on our website. And those are pre-enrollment documents. And to finalize enrollment, we need, of course, the fully executed loan participation agreement. And we'll also need a participation certificate, which will be provided to you as an exhibit. And again, all these forms can be found on our website. Common theme here throughout the presentation is that we'd love for you to to frequently view our website. All right, so with that, we are ready to field questions. Andrea, I didn't know if you wanted to field those questions, specifically regarding the loan participation program. We will talk next about the Delaware Capital Access Program.
Okay, we have 3 questions currently in question and answer. The first one comes from Josh. Does this program also help startups which have strong national importance for the US that are located in Delaware, in a Delaware hub zone?
Would you like me to fill that one, Regina?
So basically, again, this is targeted, to the banks, and the banks are the ones who have to request to participate. So if the bank is interested in doing a loan for a business like that, there's nothing that would preclude them from, participating in the program.
All right, second question. We are a VC and wanted to know if we are eligible. Do we need to be based there or just have a company incorporated in Delaware?
I think that question is specific to the VC program. So again, that RFP is linked on our website that has the specific information in there. And then there is a question and answer period. So all questions about the venture program have to be submitted according to the RFP guidelines and will be answered that way. So I recommend you visit our website and read the RFPs for directions on how to submit there.
Next question. Will a VA only bank be eligible for the loan participation program?
I don't see why not, but I would have to dig into that a little bit more and maybe contact Treasury to talk a little bit more about that. But any questions here that we can't answer on the spot, we will document them and we will provide answers to those who need them.
All right, next question from Ivan. Do you offer variable rate participation terms?
The lender can have a variable rate, yes. The division's loan will always be fixed at prime.
Next question comes from Margot. Could the funds be used to help a person buy an existing business?
Generally speaking, no. This is not for business acquisition. It's also not permitted to be, funds are not permitted to be used to buy an ownership share in a business either. So I'd say generally that would be prohibited, yeah.
Right, the next question is from Todd. How much is the current or the first allocation?
Sure. So our funding is allocated equally across 3 tranches. So we have approximately $20 million in the first allocation. But again, that is divided across the 4 programs.
The next question comes from Kathy. Will our banks still be utilizing our normal approval process for credit criteria as far as a DCR, et cetera?
Yes. You can utilize, the bank will utilize their standard, whatever standard operating procedure they have for approving loans. And then we'll just be looking for the additional pre-enrollment documentation to be submitted to the division.
And are these loans line of credit or term loan only?
They can also be a line of credit. So yes.
Okay. That is all of the questions at this time for this.
Great.
Anybody else? All right. We can move on to Delaware Capital Access Program.
All right. So the Delaware Capital Access Program, which we refer to frequently throughout this presentation as DCAP. So again, the program purpose here is we're interested in helping small businesses flourish in Delaware by providing financing to businesses that may not otherwise have access. And the way the DCAP program works is a little unique in that it's a risk pooling concept because multiple borrowers within the same lending institution that are enrolled in the DCAP program will submit a premium payment to a reserve fund that can be drawn upon in the case of default by the lender. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Go to the next one, please. Cool. All right. So before we start talking about the details of the Delaware Capital Access Program, I wanted to familiarize everyone with 2 common terms here. So one is SETI-owned business, which you've already heard mentioned once in this presentation. So SETI stands for a socially and economically disadvantaged individual. And here we have some common categories which would be defined as a SETI individual. So a minority, a woman, veteran, someone who's disabled. If any of these individuals that are SETI individuals are 51%, have 51% ownership in the business or greater, then that would be considered a SETI-owned business. And there's a lot of qualifications that someone can meet in order to become considered SETI-owned. So just a couple that I wanted to point out here specifically. So one is a business located in a CDFI area. So if a business owner, they may not be a minority or a woman or a veteran, but their business is located in a CDFI area. So that would be a community development financial institution area. Then they would qualify as a SETI-owned business. And not only their business, but if their residence was located in a CDFI area, they would qualify as a SETI-owned business. And you can find a link to a map that details what is and what is not a CDFI area in Delaware on our fact sheet for this particular program, which is going to be posted to our website. You can also find it online if you just Google CDFI investment area map. We also provide a link to that map on the actual application, so lenders who are enrolling can easily find a link to determine whether or not the business is in a CDFI area. There's also rural here as someone who a business located in a rural area could be considered as a SETI-owned business, and that is rural as defined by the U.S. Census. And you can also find a map dictating what is considered rural and not rural in Delaware to determine whether or not an individual is or a business is SETI-owned. So just a couple things to note there. There are more, there's a more and greater description of these SETI-owned qualifications as part of the U.S. Treasury's guidelines as well. And then the other term I want to familiarize everyone with is the very small business. So that is a business, quite simply, with fewer than 10 employees at the time of the loan. And that includes independent contractors and sole proprietors. All right. We can get into the program details. Next slide, please. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the actual reserve contribution that is required as part of the DCAP program. So here you'll see the reserve contribution amounts that are required by the lender and the borrower. So something that's a little unique about the new kind of updated version of this program is that when a lender enrolls a loan to be part of the Delaware Capital Access Program, the lender will require making a 2% deposit of the enrolled loan amount into the reserve fund. The borrower will be required to make a 2% deposit. The division will then match that deposit with a 4% deposit using SSBCI funds. And then to provide additional collateral and to boost the reserve fund, we can potentially also contribute another percentage, either 10 or 20%. So if the business is a SETI-owned business, then we will also, on top of the SSBCI contribution, contribute 10% of the total enrolled amount to the reserve fund from our own strategic fund dollars. If they're a very small business, we will also contribute 10% to that reserve fund. And if they are both a SETI-owned and very small business, then we will contribute 20% of the total enrolled loan amount to that reserve fund. So that is in order to provide really additional safety and reduce risk for the lender, and that is to encourage, to facilitate more borrowing by the borrower. Next, please. All right, and this is just a description of how this works. So again, each lender will establish a different reserve account with the division, and all the borrowers that are participating in the Delaware Capital Access Program with that lender contribute to the same reserve fund. So in the event that a lender desires to make a claim on the reserve fund for one borrower, they will have access to the deposits of all of the borrowers that have contributed to that reserve fund. So each individual, but one borrower will, for one particular lender, will not be able to draw on a reserve fund from another lender. Okay. All right, so this is our enrollment process. So again, the borrower visits the participating lender. So this is a recurring theme here. Borrowers do not come directly to the Division of Small Business. Borrowers go to participating lenders, and the participating lenders enroll the borrower in these programs. So in this case, if a borrower goes to the lender and the lender decides that maybe they would, this particular borrower maybe lacks collateral or is lacking in some other credit metric, and they're willing to make this loan, but only if they can enroll it in the Delaware Capital Access Program. At that point, the participating lender can make the decision to enroll the loan in the DCAP and provide evidence of the borrower and lender reserve deposit to the Division of Small Business along with the DCAP application. We will review the application, primarily focusing on the compliance with the actual program guidelines of the enrollment. And if we believe that the enrollment complies with the guidelines, then we will then issue our deposit into the reserve fund and then send back confirmation to the lender along with evidence of our deposit. And then we ask the lender to submit quarterly enrollment reports to the division, again, regarding the status of the loan, the outstanding principal balance, whether or not the borrower is current on their payments, things of that nature. And we'll provide a list of everything we need for those quarterly enrollment reports once a lender is established as a participating lender. Okay. All right, so again, we have a list here of the required enrollment documents for the Delaware Capital Access Program. This list looks long, but I assure you that most of these documents are something that needs to be reviewed and signed. And it's not too much paperwork when you really get down to the bottom of it. All of these enrollment documents should be submitted as one PDF file to the Division of Small Business upon the enrollment of a borrower in the Delaware Capital Access Program. And all of these forms can be found on our website, once again, at de.gov/SSBCI. And with that, we are ready for more questions.
All right. I think we have a couple of questions that relate to our loan participation program from earlier. The first one, do you have a minimum of DCR?
I don't believe we do. Regina, are you familiar with a minimum established there?
I don't believe, but we will confirm that and get back to you.
Yep.
All right, the next one is, when will you accept the first loan request?
We are
Yep.
excited.
Oh, the first loan request. So if we this week establish that people are lenders are interested in participating and they submit the required documentation, I estimate that it would take probably about another additional week for the lender to review the participation agreement. And then after that, perhaps 2 weeks from now, I anticipate that we'd be able to receive a loan as part of the program.
And the next one, are the other funding areas in the state of Delaware are there other funding areas in Delaware that a lender can access for business loans?
These are the only loan programs that the division offers. I believe like the SBA has programs and some other federal partners, but these are the only two specific to the state and the Division of Small Business.
Right, next question. Can DCAP help my startup?
If a lender is willing to loan you funds as part of these programs, then yes. And that is because lenders, again, the lenders in all these programs, the lenders still have capital at risk and they're still the ones servicing the loan. So whether or not your startup will be funded is dependent on, is really a lender, ultimately a lender decision.
All right. Are there any other questions on the DCAP program? All right, seeing none at the moment, we'll go to the next slide, and if any come in the meantime, we'll circle back to them.
Cool. Let's see here. Yeah, do you want me to review this one, Andrea?
You know what, I can go ahead and do that. So for this webinar, if you have additional questions about either of these programs, the loan participation program or the Delaware Capital Access Program, you can email those questions to business_finance@delaware.gov. We dropped that in the chat earlier. A recording of this webinar will be available on de.gov/SSBCI in the coming days, hopefully by the end of the day. For banks, credit unions, CDFIs, we ask that you share this recording with your staff. Because of our small size, we're unable to schedule multiple in-person meetings with every lending institution. So this would be the easiest way for you to share the information with your staff. And then you can submit additional questions they may have, and we'll get them answered. And after the webinar, survey will be sent to you to see what materials you think would be helpful in communicating this information in this program, not only to your staff, but also to your customers. And lastly, you can follow us on our LinkedIn. That's the business social media platform that most people use, at linkedin.com/company/DE-small business. And of course, we also have social media channels on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And let me just check questions. Yes, we have 2 more that came in. Is there a max dollar amount contribution from SSBCI or DSB?
Yes, there is. So there is, well, that's a yes and a no. So there is no maximum dollar contribution from the SSBCI funds. That'll be 2% of the total enrolled loan amount. And there is no max there. But for the additional kind of SETI-owned or very small business contribution that the division will make, there is a cap at $30,000 for one loan within 1 year, one borrower within 1 year, let's say. And there is an absolute cap of $90,000 over a 3-year time frame. So if the same borrower were to, let's say, receive the full 20% match and take out a $150,000 loan year 1, 2, and 3, they would have capped out at that $90,000 maximum from the division's strategic fund contribution.
And the next question. On the first program, the bank would take the application first and then reach out to you once that application has passed their criteria, correct?
That's correct.
That is correct. I do just want to caveat that with, you're welcome to reach out to us at any point in the process. It seems like in the past, it's been helpful to be in those conversations early on. That way, if there is something that we could flag for you that would possibly be a problem with SSBCI, that we can let you know in advance, and then otherwise we can just both kind of be aware of what's potentially coming, and to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page before you get too far along into the loan process. But you're welcome to reach out to us, you know, once you've approved us, or, you know, when the loan recipient approaches you in the first place.
All right. Are there any other questions? Last call. All right. Seeing none, thank you everyone for joining us. As we mentioned, the recorded webinar will be available on our website at de.gov/SSBCI. Additionally, we are finalizing making all of the forms organized and uniform, so we will be posting them hopefully by the end of today or end of tomorrow. All the forms that Andrew showed you for the DCAP and the DELPP program. And I do see one additional question that came in. Are there a list of lenders?
There is not a list of participating lenders yet, because we do not have, in this new program, participating lenders established. But we should have those established shortly. And we will post that to the website as well when it's ready.
All right. And with that, I thank everyone for your time and have a great day.